Whether you operate one forklift or thousands, one location or hundreds, the new My Toyota customer portal can help you optimize your operation and material handling equipment. This one-stop, free-to-use platform is designed to help you take control of your information and make smarter decisions, all at the touch of a button. Register and access your data today at my.toyotaforklift.com. That's my.toyotaforklift.com.
Hi, this is Brendan Coates of Mujin, and you're listening to the New Warehouse Podcast. Today's safety tip is when having operators within a warehouse, typically we look at material that we can handle within a 25 kilogram limit. With this 25 kilograms, it's necessary to have this within what we call the power zone of the operator, which is typically taken between the hips and the shoulders. What's a little more unknown is that as you reach further away from this power zone region of the body, these numbers actually drop drastically to as low as 7 to 3 kilograms. The only real way to remove injury in the workplace related to heavy lifting is to use robots.
With e-commerce off the charts, many small and growing warehouses are asking, how can I get ahead when my warehouse is barely keeping up? The answer is future-ready warehouse tech from Zebra Technologies. Warehouses can simplify and upgrade all processes, from automated inventory management to hands-free picking, with Zebra's tailored, scalable mobile solutions. They're simple and intuitive. There's never been a better time to upgrade for success with Zebra. How can your warehouse get ahead? The answer's in black and white. Get the answers at zebra.com/theanswer. That's zebra.com/theanswer. Fulfillment demand continues to skyrocket and outpace available labor. To keep up, warehouse operators are turning to flexible fulfillment solutions like 6 River Systems. Utilizing 6 River Systems' award-winning combination of collaborative robots, artificial intelligence, and operational expertise will make your associates and wall-to-wall fulfillment workflow more efficient. No new infrastructure, no change to warehouse layout, easy to deploy and scale, easy to train and retain associates, all at half the cost of traditional automation. Want to take your fulfillment operation to the next level? Go to www.6river.com to learn more. That's www.6river.com to learn more. How do you create warehouse superheroes? The answer is simple. With visual voice scan solutions from ProCensus. With record demand and labor shortages, warehouses need more effective workers and lightning-fast onboarding. Visual voice scan solutions from ProCensus enable warehouse workers to achieve superhero performance with up to 20% improved productivity and up to 99% accuracy. Hands-free barcode scanners from ProGlove paired with wearable mobile computers is just the beginning. Improved mobile interfaces with reduced keystrokes, easy-to-read screens, custom keyboards, voice-enabled interface, and more can be realized with ease on the leading WMS platforms. Sound too good to be true? Let us show you with our one-of-a-kind virtual demo. Visit ProCensus.com to get started today. Again, that's ProCensus.com to get started.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. On today's episode, I will be joined by Brendan Coates, and he is the Director of System Integration at Mujin. And Mujin is a robotics company, and they are providing industrial robots for everyone. So we're going to find out what that means and what Mujin's all about. What are they up to in this space, and also what are they doing specifically in the logistics space, because they do a couple of things for a couple of different industries. And they're going to tell us a little bit about how their customers are using some of their applications and what benefits they're bringing to the market. So, Brandon, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me here, Kevin.
Yeah, definitely happy to have you on. Happy to learn more about Mujin. It's not a company that I'm necessarily familiar with as much, so definitely happy to talk to you. And I think, previous guest Josh Clower, he actually connected us. He's now working at Mujin. I talked to him when he was at his previous endeavor. So So tell us a little bit about Mujin. Tell me too about Mujin and what it is that you guys do.
Yeah, sure. So it's interesting there that you haven't heard about Mujin, and I think that goes for most of the people in the United States. Mujin is a Tokyo-based company, and we've been a business and an operation for the last 10 years. We're actually coming up on our 10-year anniversary, come up in December. And since our founding, we've basically had our headquarters in Tokyo. We've opened an office in Guangzhou, that's in China. And then more recently, as of this May, we opened our U.S. office based in Atlanta.
Interesting. And so what is the expansion into the U.S.? I mean, how is that going so far? It's fresh. It sounds like as of May, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's a tremendous amount of excitement. We were actually able to just wrap up our first ever trade show in the U.S. It was at PAC Expo. So during that show, we were actually able to show a very unique application where we had a gripper that was designed and built within Mujin that was kind of multifaceted. So we had the ability to pick up cartons and palletize them within the show. But then we also had additional axes on that gripper that could go down and pick up slip sheets or pick up pallets in order to build the overall pallet load. So what we found at the show is that there was a lot of interest in this type of application. There's a lot of interest in the Mujin technology overall. So I think a lot of the excitement kind of boils down to our control hardware and some of our software magic that's happening behind the scenes.
Okay.
We do things in robotics that, let's say 5 years ago, were certainly not possible. And then even today, there's probably very few competitors out in the world that could keep up in terms of bringing this very full, well-rounded robotic solution to an end customer.
All right, very interesting. And it sounds like you guys are just getting started here, and I'm sure you're gonna be at Modex next year. You said you just finished PAC Expo.
Yeah, so we're definitely going to Modex. During PAC Expo, we had a robot that was in our booth. We had a robot that was also in our partner's booth, Motoman Yaskawa. And as we look forward to Modex, we already see kind of roughed in and in the works here what will be 4 robots in our booth, and then hopefully another 4 robots in partner booths as well. So we're really going to try to cover the gambit of the applications that we work with within the company and try to showcase that. So when we look at PAC Expo, there was a ton of interest, and we're actually following those leads now. And it looks like a lot of those will actually lead to real projects and revenue for the company as we get our start. But looking to Modex, hopefully we can find this is even like doubly or triply the case in terms of the uptick and the interest in the technology.
All right, very interesting, and I'll be at Modex. So I'll be sure to come by and check it out in person. So let's talk a little bit more about Mujin and what it is exactly you guys are doing. So your slogan I see on the website is "Industrial Robots for Everyone." So talk to me about that. What does that mean to Mujin, and how are you really making that a reality and putting that out there for the industry? Yeah,
sure. So if we look back in terms of technology and the trends that are repeating in technology, you look 20, 25 years ago, robotics started to go into automotive in a big way. And the 10 years after that and the 10 years leading up till now, really robotics has saturated the automotive market. So we see that in our segment that we're primarily focused on, which is logistics, that right now, because of the technology readiness level of, let's say, sensors, detection, compute power, all of that is suddenly becoming, let's say, viable for end users so that they could come in and use the technology. So we're a little bit broader than just that. So we're not as focused on just the logistics aspect. We do have some factory automation solutions that we offer as well. But when we think about this slogan, industrial robots for everyone, really within our company, that's the focus of making robots so simple to use, to set up, to integrate, that really, if we look 5 or 10 years down the road with our technology, we want pretty much anyone to be able to set up an industrial robot for their application. And so at a higher level, how we see this within the company is that if we can have more robots in production for every living person on the planet, then actually we can increase everyone's quality of life as a direct outcome of this. So how we look at this in terms of repeating trends is that, computers evolved for a long time, but then they didn't really take off.
Yeah.
And that's until a certain software platform came into being, like Microsoft, right? And then all of a sudden the computers, the accessibility, and everything just exponentially blew up from there. So I guess if anything, when we look at like the slogan of industrial robots for everyone at Mujin, really what we're trying to do is like ease all of the pain points, put the technology in the right place at the right time, so that at the end, hopefully in 10, 20 years, people look back at Mujin and they go, oh, that's the Microsoft of robotics.
Okay. All right. I get it now. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's a really great thing. And I think, it's interesting you guys are taking that approach and that's the strategy because, I think that for so long, robotics and automation in general has been, for a lot of people, it seemed like daunting in a sense because, technology seems complicated and robots, oh my God, it's the future. What's going on here? But the fact that you guys are trying to sort of simplify it and, make it very easy to use and utilize in a sense is really a great step for the market and technology as a whole, I think. And I love the comparison there that you said with the computers. For a long time it was the same thing with the computers. It was, you have to be some crazy scientific person, right, to utilize the computer in the right way. And now, we're using a computer right now, just like everyday people just talking to each
That's
other.
Right.
So
yeah,
with no problem. A very interesting approach, and I think it's a great approach as well, and a very good thing to be doing. So you mentioned in there, a little bit about how robots have really kind of been focused more in like the automotive space and that type of like manufacturing environment in that sense. And you guys offer manufacturing offerings as well, I saw, but we're focused on the logistics space. So tell us a little bit about the offerings for the logistics space that you guys have.
Yeah, so we really have a full spectrum offering of solutions. So it starts, let's say, on one end with piece picking, and piece picking itself actually can be very complex. So you look within that, and there's this whole spectrum of like what you could possibly cover. But piece picking either out of a tote, off of a conveyor, multiple items in a tote or in bulk trays, or however that they're presented to the robot. And then being able to either put them into downstream processes, such as like in e-commerce, like a sorter induction scenario, or being able to like kit orders. And then kitting orders has all this like layers of complexity as well. So we could either go in and simply drop them into a tote for an ASRS, and then it goes from point A to point B from there. Or we could actually build the orders up in the actual shipper boxes that end up going out the door, which requires, believe it or not, a lot of technology to be able to do the packing process. So there's a lot of this that we have at Mujin where we coupled disparate sensor technology. So we might use 3D vision systems coupled with 2D vision systems, kind of coupled with force torque sensors, which gives us some touch and feel type feedback through the gripper. Okay. And this enables us to actually go in and tightly pack these orders, for example. If we go out of piece picking, and if we look at maybe palletizing itself comes in multiple flavors. So you have the single SKU palletizing, you've got rainbow pallets where you have consistent SKUs for each layer, but then you change the SKUs layer after layer. And then you also have multi-SKU palletizing. And on this one, it's probably one of the most challenging problems in robotics to be able to solve. And Mujin has figured out a great way to solve these challenges. So there's basically on one side where you know explicitly everything coming into the robot cell, and you can kind of plan in advance.
Okay.
And then on the other side, you get a case where the robot doesn't have that read ahead type of information. So when you go from one extreme to the other, from a perfectly ordered sequence where Mujin can basically use our clustering controller, take all of the customer's orders for the entire day and break them down by shipping location, and then build up those pallets and play the game of 3D Tetris, and then come out with the exact sequence that's needed to show up to the robot just in time. We can give that to the upstream material handling equipment, and then we can work that way. And that's the most efficient way to work. But on the other end is that random palletizing. And so you get, in this case, lower cost of the upstream equipment, but then you also get like flexibility to the solution overall, because you don't have to control what's coming to the work cell. And actually our system can work quite well in this scenario just the same, at the expense of a bit of rate. And then we go a little bit further to the next application, and you get into depalletizing. So this is essentially the same as palletizing. We've got single SKU depal that we can do. We've got multi-SKU depal that we can do as well. And then for either of these, we have different gripper strategies that we might employ in order to pull off the total solution. So single SKU depalletizing, you're probably going to find Mujin doing a multi-pick in order to be competitive with layer palletizers.
Okay.
So, for decades, you'd have a depal system that can go and pick the entire layer and then drop it off onto a conveyor. And then the conveyor itself has like a descrambling element to singulate those items. At Mujin, we do things a little bit differently. We offer very flexible solutions. So we'll go in with a multi-pick. We might pick up 2 or 3 items at a time from the layer. And then we'll basically unload these from the gripper onto the conveyor so that they're singulated flow when they go to the downstream systems. And then we get to like multi-SKU depalletizing, and that one's a little bit more tricky to do a kind of a multi-pick strategy. But what we have there, we basically deploy a lot of vision in order to understand what is the state of that pallet at any given time. So we can actually create the correct pick points from the robot and have the best rate outcome. And then for all of these applications, whether it's piece picking, palletizing, depalletizing, Mujin has developed this hardware controller that is industrially rated. And so on this controller that can plug and play with like any make and model of robot, we actually have at the core like a very good state machine. So we're very good at tracking the states of what's inside of the work cell. Okay. And we could probably get into that a little bit more, but at the end of the day, it just gives this really good capability to track things such as multi-SKU depalletizing, where you kind of need to know what's on the pallet at any given time and what comes next. Right. But the secret sauce to all of this is that as you change that 3D state, all of your path planning basically gets updated so that you are narrowly skimming the next SKU that needs to be picked on your way down with one item or on your way back up when you're going to return to pick the next item. Okay. And this path planning capability typically gets Mujin anywhere from like a 10 to a 50% rate advantage compared to other systems on the market.
Very interesting. So I mean, you guys are really focusing on a lot of the movement of the pieces, and so I'm curious. Give us a couple, I guess, use cases or applications where existing customers or potential customers that you're looking at are looking to utilize the Mujin or are currently utilizing some of your solutions.
So there's probably several that we could speak to, but I guess to start, because these are a little bit more custom in nature. There's all the standard solutions that Mujin offers, which are the ones that I just walked through with piece picking and depalletizing and palletizing with multiple different flavors. But wherever there's a solution where we don't have a standard offering for it, we're actually quite good at developing it for the given project and delivering basically on time and on budget. So when we get into the first scenario here, it's related to a multi-picking robot. So this was actually our first robot deployment in the U.S. And the customer came to us and they had basically fixed bulk trays of different product families. And in each bulk tray, there were like cell dividers within the tray. And it might be like a 4x5 or 4x6 or 4x8 type of array that's in there. And then in each cell, you'll have multiple parts from the top to the bottom, maybe up to like 8 layers in height. And originally, the customer came to us and they were looking at using 4 robots in this system in order to pull this off. And when they came and we looked at like the surface level, we started to do simulation. We realized that just theoretically, through the simulation, they were going to be able to hit the rate that they were asking for. So we know when we go to production, there's this derating factor that comes into the picture. And it's typically anywhere from like 20% at a minimum up to 30 or even higher in terms of percentage type of derate. And so we had to rethink what the solution would look like. And that first solution ended up, it was basically 2 types of robot. And then there were 2 lines of these robots. So there's like a 6-axis robot feeding a bunch of conveyor. And then at the end of the conveyor, it was feeding a Delta robot and then into the shipper box. So we were fulfilling orders as part of this process, picking out of bulk and fulfilling orders at the end of the day. And so we went back to the drawing board and we tried to envision like what could we deliver to the customer that would enable them to get close to the rate that they were asking for. And what we came up with was a quite complex gripper. In terms of complexity, the gripper ended up weighing like 80 kilograms in terms of like individual parts in the bill of material, just for the hand, just for the gripper. It was over 12,000 components.
Wow.
So a ton of complexity in this thing. And we first had to get to the point that we agreed, there was a consensus that this was like the right direction to go. And then once we reached that point, we decided to proceed down the path. From the time that like the PO was received until 2 of these grippers were delivered to dock door, at the time what I realized was just like incredibly fast. Yeah. So 2 custom grippers, never had this design previously, all this complexity, and in as short as like 2.5 months from PO to receiving the grippers, all of this became possible. So you had to do like the detailed design. You have to ship it out for manufacturing. You have to get all the parts back after procurement. You have to do all the assembly and the QA testing, basically make sure the thing is going to be reliable when you ship it out. And all of that was done in this short time frame. And so I think that in itself is a showcase of what Mujin is capable of as a company. And then at the end, in terms of like what the end user could get out of this, a bit of a pivot in the direction from the first conception of the project, is that you got 2 robots instead of 4 robots. You had 1 type of robot instead of 2 types of robot. And these 2 robots could theoretically produce the rate of twice what the original 4 robots could produce.
Wow.
So it in my head, as I would go through this, I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. How do you actually do this? And it speaks to the technology that Mujin is offering. So having this state machine that understands in like terms of 3D awareness, what's going on around the robot, in terms of being able to define attributes of each one of these 3D entities in space, of whether it's a static object, a dynamic object, and then the layers and layers of technology that come after that, actually enables you to pull off in robotics kind of like some magic. So picking out of the source containers was not as straightforward as we originally envisioned. And so we had to basically do this in terms of like clusters. So we had to pick up clusters that were within a certain tolerance. And doing this itself required that we would localize every individual part inside of all of these trays. And there was all of this difficulty surrounding this in terms of like shadowing of the cardboard corrugate walls that are coming up and the parts that are down within each one of these cells. And then being able to do like all the path planning and avoid the obstacles in the scene, and then being able to batch build the orders on the output side. There was just a tremendous amount of technology and back end that had to be in place for anything like this to even be remotely possible. So I guess the point of this is that if there is a challenging robotics application that's out there, it may not have been economically viable or technically feasible before. These are things that Mujin can take a look at for end users, and we can give like a reassessment. As fast as technology is changing, what you have come to know as fact 5 years ago, it simply doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
It's the change in the technology over time, and the change of like the let's say the resolution of sensors that's increasing over time, the increase in compute power that is exponential in nature over time, and then all of the artificial intelligence that gets baked into the solution in order to actually adequately use all of this hardware. It's something that is very interesting to think about in terms of trends and everything. But in order to pull off some of these use cases and some of these scenarios for the case studies, all of this back end and all of the product and the solution has to be pretty much bulletproof, or else we just never have a shot at doing it.
Yeah, very interesting. And I mean, it sounds like you guys are really flexible, I guess, in terms of accommodating the customer need and being able to adjust the technology in a way that it will work in certain use cases, which is the example you shared there. So I mean, that's really a great thing. And it's interesting because, you talked about making robotics, I guess, simplified for everybody, and being able to making it very accessible.
Right.
So,
yep.
But you mentioned the gripper has like 12,000 parts. So I mean, it's not, the technology itself is not in a sense simplified. So I'm curious, how does the process of looking at something so complicated in the sense of producing it and creating it, how do you take that and then make it so simplified for like the end user?
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah. So the complexity of that gripper was not necessarily the number of parts within the overall design. It was the number of total actuated states. So there was something over 220 actuated states that the thing could take, because so it's basically like a 4x9 grid of extendable cylinders with vacuum cups at the end that could do the picking. And so there's 36 of these on one tool, and they're all being able to shoot up and down individually and then monitor the vacuum individually. So when you look at any number of the up and down movements, or whether the hand itself had to be able to expand to meet one product family of the parts, or contract to meet the other product family of parts. And so we had to have these multiple expand, contract positions. It changed the shape and the size of the tool as we do the expansion and the contraction. And tracking all of these states through a traditional system would almost be impossible. Probably is impossible. But at Mujin, we go to the next level in terms of understanding basically the kinematics and the inverse kinematics of the robot arm itself. And then the same way that we understand that robot arm, we understand that the gripper is a natural extension of the robot arm. Okay. So we're able to model all of these individual states, and through our controller and the I/O communication that goes back to the gripper, we can actually call each one of these. And as we call each contracted state or expanded state, or whatever the positional state of the gripper is, our model, which is running in the real-time loop of the robot, it's also updating at the same time. So at the end of the day, we're able to account for the size changes on the gripper and the different pose positions of the robot as you move in just within the work cell to do the work. And this capability in itself is really, really challenging by like any means. But because at Mujin, we focused on like the back end for so long, which you could essentially look at Mujin and say, hey, you've been in business for 10 years. We've never heard of you. Maybe you haven't been working on anything. Well, the thing is like the natural language barrier between Japan and the US, Japanese and English, is that not all of the content, and actually very little of the content, gets translated from Japanese over to English. So essentially, as we come to the US market, you can look at it as if we have been a robotics company running in stealth for the last 10 years. So what is out of sight is often out of mind. But we've been working to really make a bulletproof and solid back end for our software. And then from this, and only from this, we're able to pull off some of the applications that we pull off.
Very interesting. And it sounds like you're just getting started here on the state side, which is a great thing. But you're talking about the piece picking and the grippers, and you mentioned earlier in our discussion about nobody else really necessarily doing the types of things that you guys are doing. So there's obviously other solutions out there that are trying to tackle the piece picking, palletizing, and things like that. But I'm curious, what sets you apart, or what are some of the differences between Mujin and some of like the other players in this market?
Yeah. So what sets us apart from the competition and other players in the market is that we have a big idea at Mujin in terms of the technology. And it's actually such a simple idea that when you hear it, you just go, oh my God, that's common sense. Why is this not done everywhere? Right. And so that big idea at Mujin is the idea of model-based definition. So when you hear that, you think, well, we've had engineers for decades using CAD software, and that's model-based definition. And while that's true, none of these systems have ever been in the real-time loop of the robot. So if you think about the robots that we plug and play with, depending on the make and the model, the PID loop that controls those servo motors is operating anywhere between like a 2 millisecond and 6 millisecond turnaround time. Okay. And so in terms of our state machine, we have to update where we are in terms of our digital twin that's running in real time at that same frequency so that they're one-to-one. And actually everything that we do, if we trigger a vision system, we get a detection result that can come back, and that can update what is in the scene as well. But the idea of having this 3D model and having disparate and separate models with all of their separate attributes in this physical space of the robot, and then being able to go through and basically build up a sense of intelligence for the overall system based off these attributes and what the robot's allowed to do and not allowed to do. Basically, it forms a bit of what we call at Mujin machine intelligence. And so it's a little bit different than like artificial intelligence. So there's a tremendous number of robotics companies that are out on the market. And at the surface, it looks like they are focused on taking a neural network, training a neural network, and hoping that in the end that the robot is able to go to a position that is accurate, pick up an item, and get the item where it needs to go. So instead of this like hopeful approach that we can build a company on neural networks at Mujin, we actually do this model-based definition approach. And in the long run, what it should prove out is that because we have segmented and broken down the scene into all these disparate models that can be controlled overall, is that there is much more data through this method that can be leveraged to train neural networks than through using just a standalone vision system that might be a color camera, it might be a black and white camera, it might be a 3D sensor. And then overall, you have to annotate all of these images. And that 3D model and the model-based definition is basically like you're annotating the images as you go. So the ability to scale this up in a way that's meaningful, we hope at least at Mujin, the strategy is going to pay off with this very simple idea of model-based definition.
Very interesting, and I think it's great what you guys are doing, and it's highly complex. But I keep coming back to the fact that you guys are trying to simplify it for the end consumer, and I think that's in the end. I mean, that's really what matters, because that's what's going to get the technology more widely adopted.
Right.
Yeah, and I think the more that we can make them user friendly and not so daunting or scary in a sense, robots, then the more people will start to realize that utilizing them, like you said, getting more robots than we have people, or enough robots to match the number of people is will certainly help us improve the quality of life, and take away a lot of those kind of mundane tasks and things that people don't want to repetitively be doing, like palletizing, depalletizing, and piece picking, things of that nature. Would be a great thing. So really interesting stuff from you, Brandon, and it's interesting to hear about Mujin, and I'm looking forward to seeing Mujin in action at Modex, hopefully with the 4 robots there, definitely. But if people want to find out more information about Mujin and learn more about you guys, how can they do that?
Yeah, I think the easiest thing at this point is just a simple Google search for Mujin. If you want to come to our website, you can do that at www.mujin-corp.com.
All right, awesome. And we'll put all that information on thenewwarehouse.com as well. So, Brandon, thank you so much for coming on the show and talking to us about Mujin, and definitely looking forward to learning more about how you guys doing your expansion into the United States.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more content from the New Warehouse, check out our new video series called All Hands on LinkedIn. Just search for the New Warehouse on LinkedIn and follow along.